We didn't last time. Okay. So, this club is blessed by Pope Tawadros himself. And just to let you know, after every meeting, we send him a report with pictures, and he sent a response, and he is very, very happy. And we are taking the blessing of both Amba Michael and Amba Peter. All churches here in Southern Virginia, it's either under Amba Michael or under Amba Peter, and both of them bless the club and this activity. Because of COVID, we didn't do any major activity, but hopefully in 2022, you will see mission trips, you will see field trips, you will see trips to Egypt, and we'll do big stuff. Only because we are together. Together, always better. All right? All of us agree? All right. So, today it's our pleasure and honor to have with us Tasoni Lilyan Andrews in the house. Her title is like half a page, so bear with me, okay? She is young, but she did a lot of stuff. Listen to this. She is a priest wife. That's a burden by itself. Okay. She is a mother of two. Oh, yeah! The third one to come. Mother of three. She is an engineer, civil engineer. She is a blogger and a certified life coach. This is why she's here now. And a prepared, enriched facilitator. While she is passionate about many things, as you see, she loves teaching and coaching others about healthy relationships. And this is what we need, relationships, okay? She has an active blog that has reached thousands in various countries, where she writes for Coptic youth on the struggles they face. She lives in New Jersey. We thank her very much. She came from New Jersey last night. She stayed in a hotel. She left her husband and 2 kids. But she brought the little one with her. Did you bring the little one with her? Yeah, she brought the little one with her. Okay. Okay. Her husband is Abuna Anthony Andrews. Sorry, Abuna Anthony Andrews in Queens, New York. And maybe most of you know Abuna Anthony. He is a theologian. He has PhD in theology, and he teaches, and he does a lot for the community. God willing, one day we'll bring Abuna Anthony here to get his blessing as well. Big hand to Lilyan. I want to tell you something. She will talk for 40 minutes, and then question and answer session. I want it to be for like 4 hours. I believe the battery is going up. I want everybody to ask questions. You are not allowed to leave this room and you still have questions in mind. I will repeat this again. Never ever leave here today and you still have questions about relationship, dating, marriage, and there is no something called a stupid question or bad question. That doesn't exist. Questions are anonymous, so we'll give you a piece of paper and a pen. You can write all the questions, and she will be ready to answer all the questions.
introduction. That was a lot. But before I start, I want to explain a little bit what a life coach does, because I know it's a new term you might not all have heard before. And pretty much what a general life coach does is they'll help people reach their goals. They'll help them with a big decision they have to do. They'll help them with just general life direction, just to improve on a lot of different things, whether it's they're trying to figure out their career, they're trying to figure out relationships. That's what I focus on, is and mostly premarital relationships. So anybody who is even single, who's trying to navigate kind of the dating world, anyone who is dating or anyone who's engaged and is about to get married and wants to just strengthen that relationship before they enter marriage. So with that being said, today we are going to talk about relationships. Just raise your hand for me if you're in college. Okay, high school. Any other ages here? I know there was a few middle school. Okay, all right. So some of you are young. Maybe now's not the right time for relationships, and we'll touch a little bit on that. But it's very important for you to, even from a young age, from high school, to understand what a good, healthy Christian relationship looks like. So we're hoping to get through that today. And if you're in college, if you're soon to graduate, if you're older, if you feel like you're getting closer to that time in your life, then this is definitely something to pay attention to. Take notes if you want. And at the end, I'll give you a chance to ask questions. You can write them down. You've got some papers, or we also have a QR code. You can send them through your phone at the end. Okay? All right. So I like to always go back from the beginning. And in the beginning, meaning all the way to Adam and Eve, to Genesis, to where this idea of marriage stemmed from, right? It's not a man-made thing. For the folks, come, welcome. There's a lot of seats up here, guys. If you want to come sit down. I'll give you a minute or two to settle in. You didn't miss much. We just started. Good to start again? Got a few more. All right, you guys good now? All right. Just let's keep the chatter till the end, just so we can get through this, and I want to give you as much time at the end to ask all your questions. All right, so in the beginning, what happens in the beginning of Genesis? We see God creating, the earth, the stars, the sun, the moon, the firmament, the animals, the fish, the birds, everything, right? And then at the end, it's man. He creates Adam, okay? And I want you to pay attention to the order of creation. So I know in Genesis it kind of goes back and forth, and he ends in the beginning of chapter 1 with man being created, and then it goes back to a little bit more detail on creation, and then Adam and Eve. So it's a wonderful chapter to read over and over again. We've only got 3 chapters before, or technically 2, before the fall. The fall happens in chapter 3. So Adam is created, right? He's in union with God. He's in the garden. He can talk to him. He can be with him. He's in his presence. There's no barrier there, right? And then Adam is given responsibilities. In chapter 2, the Lord says, "Then the Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it." Right? He gave him the job of naming the animals, of tending to the garden. But it was not hard work like the punishment came later, where man was sweating, and it was something very difficult. It was a joyous thing. Okay? So after he's got some responsibilities, God puts him to rest. He puts him to sleep. He takes his rib, creates woman from it, creates Eve, and then right before the creation of Eve, God said, "And the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." Notice in all of creation, God always said, and it was good, and it was good, and it was good. This is the first time where he stops in the beginning and says something is not good here. Right? It is not good that man should be alone. I'm going to make him a helper. So, whenever I give talks to women, to the girls especially, I always tell them, look, it wasn't good without us, It wasn't complete until then. And then Eve comes into the picture. How does Adam respond to that? Do you guys remember? Okay, so before the fall, Adam, sees her and he says, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed." This is God saying it, right? Giving instructions, you're going to leave your father and mother. Notice Adam and Eve had no father and mother, right? He's telling us this as instruction going forward. So it's a beautiful thing, right? Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, we're one. And then after the fall happens, she takes of the fruit, eats it, gives it to Adam. And then God is looking for him. He says, "Where are you?" So he said, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat?" Then the man said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate." So it went from bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, to that woman that you gave me, and point back the finger, blame you. It's your fault for giving her to me. She made me do it. So you see how the tone has drastically changed once sin entered into the world. And now we have the rest of, humanity, the rest of history, trying to reconcile that union with one another and that union with God. And, I thank God for his incarnation, crucifixion, where he came to redeem our human race to be back with him. All right. So why did I go into all of this? I'm here to talk about relationships. Why are we focusing so much on Adam and Eve? Because this is where it starts, right? And we see all throughout the Old Testament of wonderful marriages, of lots of examples. We go to the New Testament, and St. Paul talks a lot about this, right? This is where we read a lot of the readings from in the wedding ceremony and the sacrament, from Ephesians chapter 5, from the Pauline epistle there. But before we even decide if we want to get married, right? Do I want to start a relationship? Is this the path for me? This is where it's important to not skip this step, right? Let's decide for God's will for my life. Is it beneficial for me? Is it going to be fruitful for me to enter into a relationship leading to marriage? Or is celibacy the way that I want to go? I'm going to share with you guys a book on this at the end. I have a resource slide. But St. Paul talks a lot about this, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 7, lots of really great stuff in here. So the chapter starts with, "Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband." So he's saying because of sexual immorality, because of all these sexual desires that we have, especially at the time, and even throughout the history of the Bible, you see people being really tempted by this. He's like, it's better for you to have a spouse. We know that marriage is for procreation, but if you read the Fathers, especially St. John Chrysostom, he'll tell you that this is his number one thing, where he says marriage is like a harbor in a storm, where you're there for safety, and then it's procreation to fill the earth, like God told us. Okay? And then a couple of verses later, same chapter, we know St. Paul was celibate. He says, "But I want you to be without care. He who is unmarried cares for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord, but he who is married cares about the things of the world, how he may please his wife." So it's, he's saying, okay, marriage is great, go for it to flee sexual immorality, but it's better for you to be celibate like me, so I can serve God with all my time. I don't have to worry about a spouse or a wife. All my time is devoted to God. So, and this is where a lot of people want the monastic route, really desire that, and see that they want to spend their life serving God and not be distracted by, things of the world, whether it's marriage, children, and all the responsibilities that come with it. Neither path is easy. Neither one is, easier than the other. They all have their struggles. Anywhere in your life where you're trying to seek God, the devil will put obstacles there, to try to make you fall and to tempt you. So first decipher, and also with, your father confession, seek his help in figuring this out. I'll tell you, my husband, when I met him, we met in college, so we both went to NJIT, which is New Jersey Institute of Technology. He was very quiet, kind of kept to himself, very different than what he is now. And I remember getting to know him a little bit more in the beginning. He was a year older, and he would always go off to the monasteries in his summer and winter breaks, like Egypt, Texas, and all the wonderful places here. And he did have that kind of desire, maybe I do want to spend my life in a monastery. Thank God he didn't. But that wasn't until 3 years later that he decided, well, you know what, maybe marriage is what's, the path for me. And his father's confession helped, guided him through that. His father's confession was celibate too, so I think that helped. He got to see both worlds. All right. So if we are going to go down the marriage path, right, that's what we're focusing on today. I was at a marriage conference last weekend. Dr. Philip Mamalakis is a Greek Orthodox professor and author. He wrote a book about parenting, which is wonderful. And he said two things that really stuck out to me. And if we see marriage through this lens, we're going to have much clearer vision than what the world tells us about marriage. So marriage is a journey of accessing Him and acquiring that love. So we're seeking God on that path always. Our love for God is expressed through the love for our spouse. We get the love from who? The giver of life, right? From God Himself. And from that, then I can give love to my spouse. I can't give something I do not have. And we're going to get more into that. And then I wrote here, marriage is salvific. It is leading us to salvation. That is why it was there for us, right? He wasn't just there to help Adam, tend to the garden or work with him or just to procreate. But what's our whole existence for? It's for the kingdom, right? To make it back to where God intended us to be with Him. And your spouse is supposed to help you get there. That's the number one goal, guys, right? What's the point of marriage? Is to help each other reach heaven. Okay. Do you remember this part in the gospel where they asked Christ, what's the greatest commandment? And this was His answer. He said, Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That is the first and great commandment. So this is the greatest commandment that we have. Love God, okay? And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So it's really simple, right? Just love God, love your neighbor as yourself. And when we see that, we sometimes forget this really important part here about loving ourselves. I can't love my neighbor if I cannot love myself first. And I cannot love any of me or them if I do not love God first and get that love from Him. And who's your neighbor when you're married? Your neighbor can mean a lot of things, right? Even right now as single, you're living with your family, your parents, your siblings, people within even your church community, your neighborhood community, people closest to you. So these are all the people that you're with. So your spouse is part of that, if that's the path that you choose to go on. So number one, right, I need to love God. And I'm sure you've heard this a million times before, that God is the foundation of any successful relationship. God should be the foundation of your marriage. You see how this house is built on a really solid rock, and no matter how many times those waves will hit it, it's not going anywhere. Now, if we're building the house on sand, you know what happens with that, right? It's going to get knocked over right away. It's going to collapse. It's going to get destroyed. And unfortunately, that's what's been happening in America for 50% of the marriages that start. What happens, they end in divorce. Because the foundation, it's not really there. And in the Christian church, we'll tell you what the foundation is. You can have all these great tools of communication and conflict resolution and things we'll get into later. But really, the basis of it is God. So even if everything else is dark and really tough, which marriage is hard, it's not easy, right? No matter how many waves hit against that, you're going to stand, you're going to figure it out, you're going to get through it. Yes, it might be hard, but it's worth it. It's salvific. Remember, salvation is not easy. It's going to be hard. All right? And then, number 2, right? Before you can love your neighbor, it's your neighbor as yourself. So let me figure out how to love myself first. Sometimes we have it backwards, where we're like, I need a partner first to fulfill all my needs, to tell me they love me so I can love myself, so I can have self-esteem and self-love. But it's really the opposite. Going into a relationship with that mentality is actually dangerous. We come in with the mentality of I need rather than I'm giving. That's what a relationship is. You're sacrificing, you're giving before asking anything at all. So I'm not going into the relationship with insecurities, with this wrong mentality of I need somebody to complete me, this idea of soulmates. I'll tell you, I don't believe in such a thing, because we are complete without anybody else. We're complete with Christ alone, right? I don't need a partner for salvation, right? That's where the celibacy part comes in. I don't need a partner where my happiness depends on it. I'm not always looking for the next thing, I'll be happy when I enter a relationship, I'll be happy when I get married, when I graduate, when I have kids. You're never going to get there. The finish line is always going to get pushed further and further. So I love myself, I know who I am in Christ. It's not like a prideful, narcissistic kind of love. I'm confident in who Christ made me. I'm his daughter, I'm his son, and I'm worthy of his love, and I'm able to now give love to others. So this is really important. And this is where I think your age right now, remember when I was your age, I struggled with this. I was always looking for affirmation from others, compliments from others, for people to tell me, oh, you're really, you're nice, you're pretty, you're good, whatever it might be, to kind of help my self-esteem, where really, if I opened up my Bible and I read it, all those things are in there. God tells us those truths, but sometimes we kind of turn our eyes away from that, kind of shut off our ears, and we're like, no, let me listen to what the world is telling me. There's a lot of negative messages out there, some positive as well, but the intent of it, it's not as pure as the love that God has for us. So spend this time, focusing on these 2 loves first. Build your relationship with God from now, right? Have a strong spiritual life where you're partaking of the sacraments, you're having your prayer, your Bible reading, all the things that are going to bring you closer to him. And God is really sweet, guys. We sometimes look at him oh, I have to read my Bible, I'm so tired, I don't want to. But go to him hungry and thirsty and see how he's going to fill you up. Go find him in service and serving the poor, right? When he says, when I was hungry, you gave me food, when I was thirsty, you gave me drink. This is how we can meet Christ, face to face in real life. It's a beautiful thing to develop. Okay? So once we have those 2 first, and people will get there in maybe earlier than others. Some people will take a little bit longer. People like to ask me, hey, what age can I start dating? I'm I don't know. How mature are you? Do you have self-love? Do you have God's love? It could take you 20 years to get there. It could take you 30 years to get there. It really depends. And it's not an end once you get there. It's an ongoing thing. I'm still building my relationship with God. I'm still building that self-love so I can love others. So it's a continuous thing, but you have to have a strong enough foundation to build on it first. So number 3. I know there's a lot of words on this slide. I usually like to stay with pictures, but this is now your relationship with others, right? So let's get rid of the false expectations and learn the true meaning of love. What are some false expectations that we're taught? Whether it's growing up, through the media, TV, movies, rom-coms. Chick flicks are my favorite, but they are terrible at teaching you what real relationships look like, okay? Like anything you see in those, just throw it out the window. It's there for entertainment. That's not real life, okay? I actually get questions all the time as a coach when I'm talking to singles or people who are like trying to date and navigate that. They're telling me, you know, I thought it would be one way, like I saw in the movies, but I'm not feeling this like butterfly feeling, or I'm not feeling this head over heels feeling that I've seen on the screen growing up. They're like, is something wrong with me? Do you think it's the wrong person? I'm like, no, please, like stop. This is all like made up. You know, things that you've seen in movies. Like I asked them, like, are you looking forward to being with this person? Is it an edifying relationship? You want to get deeper into the things that are going to help you determine if this is the right person or not. Butterfly feelings are based in like anxious feelings. Anxiety is something you want to stay away from, right? You're anxious before a test or before you're about to perform and do something that's hard. We don't want to really associate that with a partner or a spouse. Okay, so that's just one example. And there's so many other ones. TV's not going to show you how hard it is. They're going to show you the arguments that couples have. They only want to show you the big, extravagant gestures, the romantic dinners. And yes, that stuff is there too, but that's not the only thing that's there. Okay? So if I want to know what true love is, 1 Corinthians 13 is wonderful. Right? Love is patient, kind, does not envy, does not boast, is not proud, does not dishonor others, is not self-seeking, is not easily angered, keeps no record of wrongs. These are really, really important things to pick up on. And if I'm in a relationship and it's the opposite of this description, then that's a red flag, right? And we can talk about red flags too if you have questions on that. But there's lots of red flags I can pick up and see. Is this person like impatient? Are they, okay, they might be kind to me, they might be nice to me, but everybody else they meet, their family, their friends, the waiter that's at the restaurant that's serving us, they're very rude too. That's telling me something about that personality, right? And then we know it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, perseveres, and love never fails. Lots of beautiful things about what true love really is. And then the other passage that the church refers us to in the marriage ceremony is Ephesians 5. I only took like a few verses out from it. This is verse 22. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. And then, wives kind of, or, women when they read this, they're like, oh, what does that mean? I have to submit, and that's not fair, and, he's not the boss of me. That's not what it's about, okay? Because I want you to listen to what the command is to the husband. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. That's a big, heavy load right there, right? To love your wife as Christ loved the church and died for the church for her salvation, right? And obviously, it's not just the husband who's sanctifying and cleansing. It's a work between both of you, right? It's a synergy. It's something that we're both working on together to become a glorious church for God, right? That we say the house is like the man is the priest of the house, and it's like a little church at home with the children and the wife. And we want to bring that whole church to God at the end. There's also a few other verses between 22 and I think that one is 25 about, commands to the wife. Read a little bit more. So I wrote down here as well, you won't know who you're looking for if you don't know what you're looking for. Like when I was your age, people will say, yeah, I want a boyfriend or girlfriend that is good looking, right, attractive is really important, who's athletic, who's ambitious, who has good grades, or who makes money, or they have a job. And we have these like superficial checklist items, right? Bam, 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 this is what I want. You gotta go deeper than that, guys. Okay, and I do this with my relationship clients as well, and I say, okay, tell me what you want out of a spouse. And I'm like, nothing surface level. forget what they look like, forget how high, how skinny, how, tall, or what they might be, not even their job. Like, I don't want you to come in and say, I want only a doctor. So I'm like, you're telling me you want somebody attracted, that you're attracted to. That's important, right? Physical attraction is important, but it comes with a lot of different attractions: emotional attraction, intellectual attraction, and they all kind of grow together. Spiritual attraction. So that's what you're describing to me when you're telling me you want somebody this tall, looks like this, has this type of hair, this color eyes. Okay, great. I want somebody who's a doctor. What are you really telling me there? I want somebody who's educated, who's gone through like a higher education system, like, usually like you have. I want somebody who's ambitious, who's not lazy. That's what it means when I want somebody who's successful, right? I don't want someone sitting at home on the couch. I want somebody who's driven. That's wonderful. Let's look at what else I want. I want somebody who's going to fulfill all these things for me. So I don't want just a deacon or just a servant in church, right? Because that can also be very surface level. But I want somebody who has a true relationship with God and is able to bring me closer to God, as well as, build my house together to be a glorious church for God. So all these things are really, really important. And then once they kind of make that list with me, I say, okay, do you have all these things? Because you can't ask for somebody who's ambitious if you stopped right after high school. You can't ask for somebody who's close to God if you go to church only on Easter and Christmas. It doesn't work like that. It's not going to be compatible. The balance is going to be off. Okay, so when it comes time for you to enter a relationship, so those in high school, when you're much older, right? I always say when marriage is close by, when I can see myself getting married in the near future, I don't mean 10 years. Maybe you can figure that out with your parents and your father confession. 2-3 years maybe, I don't know. Definitely after you've established yourself, at least you have a vision of what your career is going to be, where your life is heading. Remember with Adam in the beginning, remember that first slide? I know some of you can't wait, I'm going to go back to it really quick. So right here, number 3, before Eve comes into the picture, Adam had responsibilities. He had a job, he had to tend to the garden, he had to name the animals, he had to look after them. Same thing with us. Let's figure out what we're going to be doing with our life, with our spouse, before they come into the picture. And then Adam had to rest a little bit sometimes, we get too antsy with things. Okay. So have clear vision, know what love looks like, know what my life is going to look like. I'm getting guidance from my parents. If I'm sneaking around behind my parents' back, that's red flag number 1, telling you you are not at the right time to start dating. That's not a way to start a fruitful relationship. If your father of confession is telling you, hey, I think you have some growth to still do, listen to him, okay? I remember when Abuna, my husband, was kind of first interested in me. I was still like my last year in college, and I went to my father of confession. I was like, look, I don't know if my parents are going to say yes, like I'm still young, I'm still not done with school, but I was like working, I had an internship, I kind of knew where I was heading. And then he was very wise. He told me, he's like, go tell your parents, and whatever they tell you to do, listen to them. Because I was like convinced, I was like, this is the right time, I'm ready. I know him, we've been friends for 3 years. And friends, not like how people are friends these days. Okay, we didn't text and talk all the time.
You said yes.
Yes. I was willing, yes, I was willing to start. So I did talk to my parents, and my parents are, your typical Egyptian parents. They're like, no, you're not going to date. What are people going to say? Your reputation. How many of you women have heard that, right? What if people see you out in public? I was like, let's have a conversation about that. Like, what if they do see me out in public? I'm not doing anything behind your back. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm going to have your blessing, and I'm trying to figure out if this is the right person for me. And they come from the mentality of like, if that's what you want to do, get engaged. I'm like, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to, figure that out first before we commit to a serious engagement. I know in Egypt it's done a little bit differently, and it's like the dibble and the ring or the shadka, or it's a little bit different. But so anyway, they eventually came around, they said yes. And here we are today.
The boundaries, please.
The boundaries, yes,
It
absolutely.
is very important.
Yes, boundaries are very important. So I think I actually gave a Zoom meeting to some of you here from the church in Hampton during COVID, I want to say last year, about purity. And here, I'm going to talk about physical boundaries, but also emotional ones. Let's do that one because it's easier to get it over with. So emotional boundaries, what do I mean by that? I mean that I'm not getting emotionally attached to somebody too quickly, not at the right time, where even if like the physical relationship is not in the picture, this can even be like all through phone, everybody's connecting like online these days. I can get very, very attached to somebody quickly in a immature way if I'm not setting my boundaries right. So how do I do that? I'm not sharing things too quickly about myself, so I'm not telling them all my secrets, the first time or second or third. You need to build that trust first. You need to keep asking yourself, do I see myself with this person? And you take baby steps, right? We're not sharing everything all at once. We're not scaring them right off the bat, right? You want them to get to know you a little bit at a time. And then you're seeing, hey, are there red flags here? Are they showing me things that I don't want in a partner? And if you're starting to see that, then okay, then I don't need to share all this stuff because this is not the right person for me. I don't see this heading in a good direction. So that's the emotional boundaries. And then there's a lot of other things that come with it too, but that's kind of the summary. Now your physical boundaries. Physical boundaries, especially when you're in a relationship or even when you're single, right? Because sometimes we can be physical with other people even if we're not in a relationship. You're communicating about what your boundaries. Hey, I'm not comfortable with this. We're not going to do this. Have rules like, hey, I don't think we should be out alone in places where there's no one else or in a room together by ourselves because I know I'm going to get tempted. Be honest with yourself, okay? Don't say I'm going to hang out for 3 hours with them in my dorm room and nothing's going to happen. Yeah, you're giving the devil wide playground for him to tempt you and open and fall into things. Maybe it's, hey, I don't want to go to the movies because it's dark, no one can see, I'm tempted, to do whatever it is I want. So avoid that. Or some people will say, listen, I don't want to spend, the whole day with you one-on-one because it's building that close connection too much, and then I get physically attracted, more tempted. It looks different for everybody. You have to be very honest with yourself and what you can handle and what you can't handle. And then also be respectful of the other partner. So if something is not okay with them, but you're like, I'm fine with that, that doesn't bother me, you respect their boundaries, right? You always want to go with the more conservative thing. You don't want to put them in a place where you're tempting them. And then if someone is stepping over your boundaries, if they're saying, yes, 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 I agree, but they're doing something else, they're pushing you out of your comfort zone, they're trying to push that line and see what the limit is, that's a red flag right there too, right? Their words are saying one thing, but their actions are saying something completely different. And especially if you're going to be in a relationship for a while, like, hey, I know I'm not going to be married for another, year, 2 years, whatever it might be, pace yourself, okay? So the more you get to know somebody, the more that you're emotionally attached, the more you want to express that in a physical way, which, by the way, is a God-given thing, okay? Sex is not a bad thing, it's the timing of it, right? God has blessed the marriage between man and wife to procreate in this particular way. It's not something that the world has created. It's by God in the beginning. And we have to understand that it's a sacred thing, it's a special thing, only to be shared between a wife and husband, not to be shared with anybody outside of that union, because then it loses its sacredness, it loses its holiness and its value, and it's what God intended it to be. So be very careful around that. And I'm not just talking about sex, any other kind of physical intimacy, right? Because some people will say, well, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to push my line. Can I do this? Can I do that? I always get questions of what's the most physical I can be before marriage? I'm like, I'm not going to answer that for you. You have to know that it's not about pushing the line. It's not about okay, what's red zone, green zone. And And the devil is always trying to trick you and to kind of trip you up and say, hey, that's not a big deal, you could do that, and it always leads to something else. So it's always better to, stay on the side where there is a hard boundary and saying, no, this is not what we want to do. Okay? All right. Because, by the way, another thing here, if I'm getting physically attached to somebody, and you know how they say love is blind, and I can be only holding on to that connection, that physical connection, and they might be the worst person for me. I'm going to be blinded by that. I'm going to say, well, I feel this close connection because, yeah, that's what physical connection, that's what physical intimacy does in a marriage. It brings you closer together. It brings those emotions into a physical way. We can express it to one another, that love that we have. So if you're doing one before the other, you're setting yourself up for failure. Where you feel like I'm attached, or, who's going to want me after this, after I've done X, Y, and Z. No future partner is going to be okay with that, so I'm stuck with this person, and that's a terrible situation to find yourself in. And if you are there, if you have sinned, if you've done whatever it might be, don't forget that repentance, we say it all the time, right, that turns adulterers into virgins. There's no, thing that you can't repent from, especially when it comes to this stuff. Like, God is always waiting for you. Look at St. Mary of Egypt. She was a harlot, she was a prostitute. And look at the scene that she became, or, St. Moses the Black. Look at how many bad deeds he's done and how he became a saint. It's possible. Don't let the devil fool you and tell you, you know what, it's over for you, you've already done this, you're gone, forget God, try to find somebody who's Christian, right? Don't listen to any of that stuff. Repentance not only makes it new, but it restores it to being even better. Like, better than how you were even in the beginning, because now you have that close connection with God, that, he's rescued you, and you have that being back with him again that maybe you didn't have with him in the beginning. All right, so once I've entered a relationship, I've got my boundaries, right? I have all that good stuff. I have guidance, whether it's from an older mentor, from my parents, from a servant, from Abuna, from anybody that you trust. You want to check your compatibility. I do something called Prepare and Enrich, which is an assessment of something close to almost 100 questions, where a couple will fill out when they're engaged, or even if they're seriously dating, they want to, just have some help or improvement in the relationship. So I'll have them fill out this report, and it checks 9 different levels of compatibility, and it scores them from 0 to 100, and it shows them here, these are areas that you need to grow in, these areas are really strong, you're good there. So communication, conflict resolution, how we could solve our problems, partner style and habits, like their characteristics, and how they are. Financial management is always a big one, especially, by the way, this assessment can also be taken if you're married. It just looks a little bit different. But financial management, when you're a couple planning a wedding, you're trying to spend your money and figure out what you want to do, there's some conflict there sometimes. Leisure activities, what do we like to do together for fun? Or how much time are we okay spending apart, together, so on. Sexual expectations, so my boundaries, my physical boundaries, do you honor that? Are we on the same page? Family and friends, how they influence your relationship. Sometimes you have family that's very involved, too involved, where sometimes you have to kind of put a boundary, especially when you're married or getting very close to marriage and they want to dictate everything in the wedding and so on. Friends, how are the circle of friends around my partner, how are they influencing them? Are they good friends, bad friends that can tell me a lot about them? Relationship roles, again, closer when you're getting married, and we're talking about, okay, who's going to do what, who's the head of the house, who's all of these great things, who's going to cook, clean, help. And I'll tell you here that the relationship roles that we grew up in our families and in our parents' houses look very different than what a lot of the newer generation might look like. Growing up, my dad never entered the kitchen. My mom did the cleaning, the cooking. I'm sure a lot of your moms did too. Whether they worked or not, a lot of them were able to be stay-at-home moms. They had that blessing. But when I first got married, I'll tell you, my husband is the one who enjoys cooking. So he was always more in the kitchen. I'm like, I'll clean up, that's fine, I'll do the laundry. But something he enjoys, he's good at, especially now too, when people come over, we're having a gathering, my mom's like, what are you gonna make for dinner? What can I bring? I'm like, let me ask him when he's gonna cook. So, everybody has different expectations, different relationship roles. And then the last one, which is the most important, is spiritual beliefs. And I don't just mean like I need them to be Christian or I need them to be Coptic, but even within the Coptic church, people have different levels of spiritual beliefs, meaning like I can be that Sunday churchgoer, really committed service, everything, or I can be somebody who's only showing up on holidays and I don't really partake of the sacraments, I don't really care to confess. These two people are not going to be compatible, right? You want to have somebody who loves God more than they love you. Okay, and you want to love God more than you love your spouse. Because if it's the other way around, then we make them a God, we make them like an idol in our life. Right, the gospel says, even the word hate is really strong, like hate your father, mother, brother, sister, and so on. And it really just means that we have to love God more than anybody else in our life. If we're both aiming towards God, we're going to naturally get closer to one another, right? Versus when we're trying to meet each other and we're not meeting halfway and we're bumping heads. And God has to be the focus. Like, I can't stress that enough. You will go through, problems. You will have different expectations. You will have things that you're going to fight about. Absolutely, that's guaranteed. That's not saying like if I pick the right person, we're never going to fight. We're never going to have a conflict. I've been married for about 7 years. We still do, but I would say you get better at resolving the issues and the problems and better at understanding one another. But the core that we always come back to is sacrifice. Love is sacrifice. I'm going to give of myself to please my spouse, right? It's 100, I'm giving 100%. It's not 50-50 where I'm waiting for them to meet me halfway and I'm like, I'm not getting there until you get there. And it becomes this tug of war. It's giving. It's always giving. And it's hard. It sounds nice and easy. Sacrifice, whatever that means. It's very, very hard when you're living with somebody and you're practicing that out daily. Okay. I don't know if I have time to actually get into this. I hit my 40 minutes. But this slide was just talking about different stages of relationship. If you want to read more on it, there's a book called Love in Every Season by a Christian author who's a marriage therapist. She just talks about how, let me see if I can summarize this in a minute. Spring, you start a relationship on a high, everything's blossoming. Summer, things are getting nice and warm and comfortable. Fall, you're starting to see their true colors, and you're checking compatibility. You're seeing, is this really the right person for me? Because they're not saying all the sweet words they used to say in the beginning. They're not as romantic. This is where we're getting down to the nitty-gritty stuff, right? And winter, sometimes a relationship will kind of feel like it's frozen. You don't feel empathetic anymore towards one another's apathy. And then you try to resolve that and come back to that spring, fresh kind of first love. But it's a whole book on this, okay, if you want to learn more about it. Then I want to leave you with these resources. St. John Chrysostom's book on marriage and family life is wonderful to read. He even gets into detail about how you should celebrate your wedding, and what a healthy marriage looks like between the roles of the husband and the roles of the wife. That second book, Marriage and Virginity According to St. John Chrysostom, it's written by an Eastern Orthodox priest. His name is Father Josiah Trenum. Very scholarly. Half the page is footnotes and the other half is him writing. But if you want to learn more about what it looked in the garden, what the fathers thought that sexuality was before the fall, it's a little bit different. I'll tell you, they don't believe that Adam and Eve were born with sexual organs, but you want to focus on what we are today, because obviously it's after the fall. And this is where he talks about St. John Chrysostom's idea of how marriage is that harbor in the storm to help you flee sexual immorality. Okay? That third book, To Become One, it's actually written by a Coptic priest from Australia, talking about engagement and marriage, and it has really nice things, very simply written. what I'm looking for in a spouse. He breaks down the Orthodox marriage rights, I believe, at the end of the book, if you're interested in that. And then one that I like, True Love Dates, it's talking about dating. And she breaks down the book. She's the same one who wrote Love in Every Season that I just mentioned. She's actually Egyptian too, but not Orthodox. But the book doesn't get into theology. It's just more about practical dating. Dating upward, like with God, dating outward with others, dating inward, knowing myself, knowing what I'm ready for. And then if you are in a relationship, maybe some of your servants are engaged or married, and you want to know about that assessment, it's Prepare and Enrich. You have to do it through a facilitator. There is like a free version of it out there somewhere. If you Google, I'm sure you can find it, where it'll give you the report and you'll see the compatibility. You can kind of work through that. But there's a ton of more resources out there. I do have a blog. I forgot to write it on here, just because I'm switching my URL soon. Right now it's lilyanthorns.com, which I know a lot of you are on. There's I think out of the 50 blog posts I have, there's about 15 on relationships, more to come. But it's a good way to start. It's like 2-3 pages of an article. It is going to be lilyanandrews.com soon. If you're on Instagram, just follow me on there, and I always link everything so you don't have to remember the link. Okay? And then it's question time. You can take out your phones. I have also paper and pens up here if anybody wants to pass them out if you want one. This is easy to just scan it with your camera, submit it. You don't have to write your name. It's all anonymous. Okay? Yes? Yeah, we have. You can raise your hand too, and I'll give you the mic to ask. All right, guys, pay attention as you're also submitting your questions for other people's questions.
Until they pass the paper and pen, I have 2 questions for you. Recently, we noticed the kids in high school, in recent generation, they start dating very early in high school, and they think that they can sustain this relationship for 10 years until they are ready actually to get married. How to convince them that this is way too early, like they start 14, 15 years old, and they think that they can continue until they get married for more than 10 years. This is one question. The other thing I noticed, especially between, like it's very famous between the boys, more between the boys. The boys tend to be more attracted to non-Egyptian girls, of course. So they use that I am going to make her Christian. I'm going to make her Coptic Orthodox. I will هفتقدها هجيبها للمسيح وهعمدها وهخليها Orthodox. And this is a way that I will bring somebody to Jesus Christ and make her Christian. How to convince them that this will not be the right thing to. If she is already Coptic Orthodox that joined the church and love the church, it's a different story. But how to convince them that زي ما كان أبونا داود لمعي بيقول زي ما فيش حاجة اسمها marriage, preaching marriage. Those are the 2 points that I would like you to address, please. Thank you.
Sure, no, those are all great questions. So the Protestants call that missionary dating as well. There's a term for it. But I'll answer your first question about, dating in high school. So there's so many things that are still developing, right? Mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I'm still like, a babe in the faith. And also your taste in people and who you're attracted to is going to change. Like I want you to think when you were in middle school, who's that crush that you had, right? And look at them now, you probably are like, I would not come anywhere near them, right? You're growing, you want to give yourself that chance to grow. I think there's even studies out there that tell you the male brain doesn't fully develop until like 25 or something in their early 20s. Women, their brains develop a little bit earlier. So I don't want to settle down for somebody that I like in high school and then I feel stuck with them because I've been with them for so long and now I can't leave them, but they're not the right person for me. Or I will walk out of the relationship and now I have years of life baggage. And yes, that repentance makes things new, but guess what? There's earthly consequences for this. I might meet somebody later and I have a lot of insecurities from that relationship. Maybe it had some toxic traits, which I think Kathy's going to talk about later today. And that can do so much harm and so much damage to me. And I have to spend a lot of years, whether it's in therapy, whether it's kind of on my own and trying to figure that out. And it might come out in your future relationships as well, where you have to deal with that. If I'm with somebody for like 10 years, you will get physical. Like, nobody's the same here, okay? That close connection is going to make you want to be physically connected, even if you have the best intentions of, no, we're not going to do anything. First of all, you can say that for yourself. You can't say that for your partner, right? Everybody has their own feelings and their own things that they have to control. So there's so many things against dating at such a young age. I get to see like the positive side of it. Like I've heard like, okay, you'll grow together, as a partner. Well, what if you're growing in different directions? What if they're not keeping up with you or you're not keeping up with them? Wait until you get to that time in your life where you're established, you know what you're doing, you know who you are, that self-love, get to know yourself first before you try to venture out and bring somebody into the picture. All right, and then the second question about dating somebody who's outside the church. So first of all, we don't want to have the savior complex. We don't want to feel like we're saving somebody, right? It's going to be unequally yoked. And the Bible says, don't do that. Don't be unequally yoked with somebody. Where someone is here, if you're not bringing them up, they're bringing you down. And I know that's different than what you said. If somebody's already Christian, there's a lot of non-Egyptians who are in the Coptic church, and they've come to God first before they've come to you. You don't want to be that middle link, because what happens if you're out of the picture? Then they're not connected with God anymore, right? You first want them to be connected with God before they're connected with you. Be friends, and maybe you want to introduce them to the church, fine, but don't have them come because you're in a relationship or they don't feel obligated to come because I want to date you. You really want them to be connected with God. And remember what I said about they need to love God more than they love you, and that's the only way the marriage is going to be fruitful. The relationship is going to grow in that sacrificial kind of love. Well, they can't love God if they're not in the church, if they don't know who God is. And that means they're going to always love me first. And that human love is always missing something. And we draw that from God. So it's a very tricky situation to be in. Remember, the divorce rate is about 50% of the country for a reason. Not everybody has God to lean back on, the church to lean back on, to tell us what a good, fruitful marriage looks like, to how we should be striving for that. So, don't shoot yourself in the foot, and then you come later and you're like, man, this was the wrong person for me. Why did I enter this? And you could have saved yourself a headache, right? If my whole goal in marriage is salvation, right? We kind of agreed on that in the beginning, right? Salvation, to come back to God. That person can't bring me to my salvation if they don't have the salvation in the first place, if they are not part of the body of Christ. It won't work. You're going to be unequally yoked. One is bound to come down. Okay. All right, so I've got a ton of questions here. We're going to try to go through them really quickly. Okay, 17 questions. How much time do we have? Okay, we're good. Well, if you guys need a break or something, you can get up and come back. Just keep the chatter down. If you need to stretch, that's fine. All right, question number 1. Should I guard my heart while dating? Yes, you should be smart about dating. What's the whole point of dating? I'm trying to figure out if this is the right person for me. So I'm going to enter a relationship with them after I've got to know them. And you can save yourself a headache, by the way, by just being friends with them first. If you have that opportunity, you can be in similar groups, similar settings, and you can kind of get to know their personality a little bit more, because sometimes when we date someone, they'll look very different to us one-on-one than they're in like a social setting or a group setting. Okay. All right. So you're being very wise when you're dating. You're trying to get to know their personality. You're not just throwing yourself. You're not just giving your heart away. And you're saying, like, this is the person I'm going to end up with, and you're getting your hopes up really high and getting emotionally attached too quickly, like we talked about earlier. So be very smart about that. And little by little, yes, you can get more, emotions can come out a little bit more and so on, but not in the beginning. Try to be as logical as possible in the beginning. Answer the question, is this the right person for me? And if not, no shame in saying, hey, sorry, I don't see this relationship going anywhere. It's not what I had in mind. And you're keeping yourselves pure, guys, the focus. You're not going to be doing anything wrong, so you can walk away from that relationship. Hopefully, better, not worse than when you came in. And you move on, right? By the grace of God. Okay, question. What are the biggest red flags that could be in a person? Lots of things. And I'm sure Kathy will get into it later, but anybody who's abusive, emotionally, physically, in any kind of way, anybody who has an addiction, they need to work through pornography, a huge one that will tear your marriage down. A lot of guys or girls will say, I'm going to stop watching once I get married because I'm going to have my spouse. Wrong mentality. There could be a whole talk given on, addiction and pornography and how it messes with your brain, it rewires your brain, your attraction, how it can be so detrimental in the marriage. But I'm not going to get into that too much. Red flags, somebody who's dishonest, who's rude to others, who doesn't honor you, doesn't honor God, disrespectful, so many red flags, okay? And everybody's red flags are different. Like, I can tolerate something if I know the person's going to work on it, versus if this is like a trait in them, and I'm like, no, I'm better than that. I'm not going to try to deal with this. Everybody's different, and where they're coming from. Have guidance. This is where it's important to have guidance. This is a funny question. Is there a Christian way to have sex while you're married? I actually give a talk to our young couples meeting who are married when we talk about this. Not ways to have it, but the mentality around what sex is, how God designed it, how it's supposed to be honorable, and a way to express our love in a physical way. But general rules is, again, the idea of sacrifice. I'm trying to make my partner happy. It's not just about me. It's not selfish, I want to just take. There are lots of things to get into when you're a little bit older and you're getting closer to marriage that we can talk about, okay? But it's not what you see on TV. I actually have an article on the blog, I think called What to Do with Your Sexual Desires, that might have some things in it. And, 5 myths about marriage, with sex being one of them. It's not what the media shows it out to be. It's a much more beautiful thing than that, how God created it. A question about how interfaith relationships affect you, and I think I answered that a bit. If faith is going to be our foundation, right, this picture of the house built on a rock, I can't build that rock with somebody who doesn't have the faith. And unless I'm convinced that's the most important thing, I'm going to be building my house on sand and things that are coming and going on compatibility. Compatibility is not enough. That's just one tool. That's wonderful. But, God is the most important thing to build it on. Okay, I'm going through these really quick. If you have a follow-up question, raise your hand or answer it, because I have 26 questions. Is there a wrong type of love? A selfish kind of love, a love where I'm trying to find attention, but that's not the true meaning of love. Anything that's different than the definition we saw up there of, I'll go back. Right here, 1 Corinthians. Any love that is not patient, unkind, envious, anything that's opposite of this, that's the wrong type of love. Okay? Should I only date people who are more spiritual than me. Yes and no. You want somebody obviously to be bringing you up and not less, but sometimes you can kind of be on the same level. That's fine. As long as both of you feel like there's a balance and you're equally yoked, you have the same goals, and you're also trying to reach those goals at the same rate. Not one person who's like, yeah, I'm gonna fast next year, I'd love to fast, just not this year. The other person's like, no, I want to fast, I want to start now. It's unequally yoked. Okay, what is the Christian view of divorce? That's a tough one. Well, first of all, we don't want to end up there, right? That's why we're doing all this work premarital when you're younger, when we're dating, to avoid that. I know the church will allow annulments in like different cases, and maybe one of the Buddhists can tell us more about this, but they'll allow it if like a spouse comes into the marriage with a big secret that's gonna affect the marriage, if there's cheating, if there's another thing. But, you know, we shouldn't even be trying to ask that question. We should be trying to not even like have that in our mind. You know, some marriage counselors will tell you like, don't use the D word. That's divorce, right? That's never a threat in the marriage. That's never an idea in the marriage. It's always, we're going to work through this. We're going to figure it out. Yes, it's going to be hard, but if, you know, we did all this work before marriage, you're on a good foundation. Don't worry. You're going to get there. Okay? Why can't we get engaged early? You can if you want to, if that's going to be like your way of dating. It just comes with a lot of, you know, expenses. Rings are not cheap. Engagement parties, if you choose to have one, are not cheap. People like to only, you know, get engaged to somebody they're pretty sure about marrying, right? You're not 100% committed until you're right in front of the altar, you and your spouse, and it's the sacrament. So if you want to spend that engaged time figuring it out, that's fine. Some people like to do that earlier on before it becomes too invested. But again, if your parents agree, if your public profession is on board with it, that's fine. Engagement is the route you want to go. Okay, this is a good one. Growing up, I never had a close friend of the opposite gender. Will this impact my future relationships because I maybe don't know how to speak to them? So you don't need to have close friends, right, of the opposite gender. Sometimes that becomes a little bit dangerous if too close, one of us starts to develop feelings for one another, the other person doesn't feel it back, or it's too early, or. But having just regular friends, right? You all go to schools that I'm sure are co-ed, you're in the church, you know, there's guys and girls around, talk to them like normal people, right? I don't need to be buddies with them, I don't need to text, call them, and, you know, be with them 24/7, but you're just having regular social interactions. No, it's not going to affect your future relationships, as long as, you know, you're not like afraid to speak to them. Again, talking to somebody as a friend should be okay. It shouldn't be something that you're nervous about. And don't feel like I need to like practice dating to be good at it, or I need to practice talking to guys or girls to know how to do it. Don't worry, when the right time comes, you're going to be mature enough to know how to handle yourself in those situations. Okay, is it wrong to go places with a girl that you are dating in a public setting? It's not wrong if you're not sneaking around, right? We said your parents know, you're not doing anything behind their back, you're not lying to them. And like I said, you know, when I see a couple out dating and they're maybe not public yet, not everybody knows about their relationship, I'm like, yeah, you know, they're trying to figure out if they're the right fit for each other. I'm not like watching them like kissing and being really touchy with one another. You're being respectful in a public place, and it's a way to date and to get to know somebody. So it's not wrong. You don't want to have that mentality of like, I'm sneaking around, it's wrong. Okay, what boundaries should be made for only close friends of the opposite gender? Well, first of all, I wouldn't recommend close friends of the opposite gender. You can be friends, that's fine. But that closeness should have a boundary of like, I'm not staying up late talking to them, I'm not texting them all the time. If like something happens in my life that's eventful, right? I do something and I get rewarded, or I get a good grade, or even something bad, right? If I get into a car accident, who's the first person that I want to tell? Answer that question. If the answer is somebody of the opposite gender, there might be a red flag here, right? They shouldn't be the closest person to you. I should have other friends first. Okay. How to be a good parent for my children. That is a wonderful question. I would recommend a book called Parenting Towards the Kingdom, written by an Orthodox writer. That's a whole other topic. And you know, if you're here, that's that one. That's wonderful. Okay. Okay. How do I love myself? How do I raise my self-esteem or confidence? How do I get over my insecurities? Go on the blog. There are 4 blog posts. Talk about self-love, self-confidence, self-esteem, and one more, another's about forget, but it's in a series. You can search it. It's right there on the homepage, and it talks about how I could do all of that, because again, that can be a whole other talk on its own. And that series was written specifically for women. If this is a guy asking the question, you can also read it and just apply it to you. I just maybe use female examples more. But how do I love myself? First, love God and know what He says about you. Know that how He values you, how He sees you. And once you've wrapped your head around that, you can't see yourself any less than. Because then I am like, I want to use a nice word here, but like I'm challenging God and I'm telling Him what you're saying is not true, and that's not obviously the case. Don't believe what the world tells you, or what your friends or bullies or other people. We want to know our value from God Himself. Okay, I'm trying to go through every single one, even though we've kind of answered some already. Okay. Okay. If it's someone who's Christian but not Orthodox, is it okay to introduce them to Orthodoxy through dating? You know, if you're in that situation already, yes, introduce them to the Orthodox Church, but don't be their crutch. Don't be the only reason that they're in the church. Like, let them kind of do their own thing, meet with their own priest, and begin their journey on their own. Don't like have to hold their hand the whole time. Okay? Introduce them to the church and let them explore and learn on their own. Okay, if you and someone else have interest in each other but both are young, what is the best way to start building a relationship with the other person? So you don't want to build a relationship with them, you want to build maybe a friendship with them. Friendship with boundaries, right? Where it doesn't turn into a relationship. If you're both still young, my mom told me this when I was in high school. She's like, listen, if this is the person for you, then God's going to save that person when it's the right time. And you need to have faith in God that He will. You know, don't feel like I have to take things into my own hands. I need to reserve them. I need to like be their boyfriend or girlfriend so nobody else picks them up, so they don't end up in a relationship with someone else. Because guess what? If they do, then they're not the right person for you. If we're always seeking God's will, the same way we're seeking, hey, is marriage for me or not? I'm seeking God's will. Is this person for me or not? And if it is for you, but not the right time, then it's not the right person, not the right relationship. Wait for the right time. And trust that God will have the right person waiting for you. Don't try to take your life in your own hands and do things what you think is good for you, because we know how that ends up sometimes. Question, how to tell someone you're not interested. Politely and firmly communicate, hey, thank you, I'm flattered, but I'm not interested. Very simple, okay? Don't worry about like, I'm gonna hurt the other person's feelings, or they're never gonna talk to me. I need to be nice. Don't do like that. You put yourself first, especially at this age. Sorry, I know there's a lot of questions. I'm trying to get through them very quickly. Okay. Ladies, don't be afraid to say no. Or guys too, if a girl's coming on way too strong, you can be like, thank you, not interested, in a polite way. Okay, how to tell someone that you're interested for a girl. Okay, so a girl is asking this, or you're interested in a girl. Either way, I'll answer it. If you're interested in someone, it's the right time, right? If your father profession's in the loop, you have that blessing to start something, then you just communicate, be intentional, right? I hate it when people come to me and they're like, listen, there's this guy. We hung out a couple times just one-on-one. We're always talking, but I don't know what this is. And I'm like, please, like, be intentional. Guys, communicate. If you're interested in someone, say, hey, I'd like to get to know you, to see if we're compatible, if we could start a relationship, and explore that. And then the girls can say yes or no if she's interested, right? If a girl is interested, because sometimes, she's like, hey, I got my eye on this guy, he has no clue, right? Sometimes guys are like, goes over their head. They're clueless. I always say you can, show some interest to start a conversation. I'm old school, and I think the guy should be asking the girl out, not the opposite way. But a girl can also show interest, and you hope the guy picks up on that. Okay. If I'm of dating age, how should I approach it? Should I be attending Coptic events? Should I flirt? Should I just wait for a guy to notice and approach me? Okay, so this is a girl asking the question. So it is good to meet other people outside your circle. If you want to go to Coptic events, that's wonderful. I don't think you need to flirt. I think you can be friendly and show interest, like I said. Even if it's not in person, or you met somebody in person and you want to send them a message on, hey, it was good seeing you at the retreat or at the event or whatever, and starting a conversation to see if there is mutual interest. Don't be afraid to do that. You're not asking them out on a date. You're just starting a conversation, okay? Guys, wouldn't that work? Yeah, maybe. Well, hopefully you started in the beginning, but just in case you didn't notice her. Okay. Is it inherently wrong as a male to use things such as my body or financial status to attract a woman with the intention of wanting to commit to marriage? That's a funny question. I don't think you should be using those things to attract them, right? Because we're not coming after you for your money or your good looks. Guess what? Your good looks are going to fade, right? That six-pack's not going to stay there. Your money also might not stay. One day, you can have a wonderful job. The next, you might not. Same with your health. Same with so many other things. So it's nice to have those things, to be invested in yourself, to be committed, to be healthy, to be ambitious. But I'm not using it as bait, right? It's kind of part of the package. Don't focus on those things. Focus on the spiritual things. That's what's going to attract a nice godly woman to you. She's not going to care if you have a six-pack or not. She's going to care if you're close to God or not. Okay, because that's what you're going to build your marriage on. And especially once you have kids, and your kids are driving you nuts, and they're waking up at 2 a.m. and they're sick, and you need a partner to help you out. You need somebody who's going to be committed and there for you. I don't need somebody super hot at 2 a.m. to just stare at. I need somebody to help me clean up the puke. Okay, so keep that in mind. We're not looking for Instagram posts and couple, all those lovey-dovey, Instagram couples and couple goals. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for true commitment. Okay. How do you know that you're ready for marriage? I'm in college, but I'm really busy with school. Or how do I find time for a relationship? If you don't have time for a relationship and you're focusing on school, there is nothing wrong with that. Don't feel rushed. Don't feel like I need to start it now. By the way, college is when you're focusing on your career first. I'm going to keep going to that Adam example. Responsibility first before you bring somebody else into the picture. So, it will come later with God's timing. Don't try to force it if it's at the wrong time. Okay, can Coptic dating still be fun? This is a funny question. Yes, it can be fun. You don't need to lust after somebody and be so physical with them to be fun. And you don't need to go out to bars and drinking or whatever it might be to be fun. Maybe that's the world's view of fun, but you can have a wonderful time getting to know somebody for the purpose of marriage. It shouldn't feel like you're dreading it. Okay. How should one go about trying to be close with someone, but not going straight into engagement like the Egyptian culture? So like I said, dating is where you want to be to get to know somebody on a lighter note than Egyptian engagement right away. I'd also respect the other person's family or the partner that you're with, if that's what they want, if this is the way they want to date or courting, if you've heard that word. see if that is something you're okay with. But definitely, being friends with them first can help, getting to know them with other people, and so on. Do you advise getting married early, like 18 or 20? No, I do not. Well, I will say I didn't get married young. I was in my early 20s. But it's not about an age. Maybe there are 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds that are very mature and ready. But chances are you're the majority that are not. So it's not about a number, it's about maturity, it's about all those loves and right at first. What do I do if my wife cheats? Well, hopefully you never get there. I'm reading the questions as they're coming, okay? I'm not filtering through them. So what do I do? Therapy is one, okay? You've got to work out through that. That's a heavy topic for your age. Hopefully you never get there. And if you do, guidance from your father confession, see a marriage counselor. And by the way, this is something to keep in mind for the future too. We don't want to wait until there's a catastrophe to go to marriage counseling. Guess what? The cheating happened way before the physical act did. There's that emotional connection that I have with somebody else that's not my spouse, that's very unhealthy. I'm starting to feel distant from my spouse. That's when I should start seeing a therapist. Not when things have already been committed, not when we're like, hey, we want to get a divorce or like be proactive, not reactive about things. And if you're single and you feel like, hey, I got a lot of baggage here from a previous relationship, from even my childhood, from abuse, from trauma, from whatever it may be, go to therapy, okay? Kathy is a therapist and she will tell you more about that, I'm sure. But it can really help us, okay? Someone asked what's my Instagram again. I will type it on there for you. It's just my name, Lilyan Andrews. Is sex wrong if you're not trying to conceive while married? No, it is not. Okay, it's something, again, it's a part of the relationship between the man and wife, not just for having children. Okay? Is it right? Is it okay to have a divorce in the right reasons? This is like the third question about divorce, maybe the fourth. Guys, I don't want to think about divorce, okay? That's not even something on the table. No, you didn't start dating. We're jumping to divorce right away. Okay. Or maybe you see others that have gotten married, that have gotten divorced, and you're trying to figure out like what their situation is. Let everybody worry about their own relationship, their own situation. Again, the church has actually a whole committee. I know in New York, New Jersey, they have like a group of priests and counselors that will review cases for divorce, but you don't want to even get there, okay? Read those books. Understand what marriage is about. Divorce is not in any of them, okay? It should not be an option. All right, I think I only have 2 more questions. Once I get to the age where most people get married, should I actively be on the look for a relationship, or should I just focus on myself? That's a good question, because sometimes people become almost like obsessed with being in a relationship, and that's not healthy. And sometimes people are just like sitting at home, and they think God is going to bring the person to like their doorstep and knock on their door, and they're like, I don't have to do anything. You want to be somewhere in the middle, okay? Where I'm living my life as is, right? I'm going about, almost there, guys, I promise. Okay, I'm going about my life the way I would, and by being who I am, I'm attracting other people to that, right? It will come naturally, but when I am interested in someone, yes, I have to make a move, yes, I have to do something, I have to speak up, I have to do something about it. I don't need to always be on the lookout, like if I'm meeting up somebody of the opposite gender, like, hey, is this person marriage material? You're going to exhaust yourself if you're always like trying to evaluate people that way. Just, be normal about it, and get guidance as well in that. It says there are apps for dating. Is it okay to use these apps? So not all apps are created equal. I would not recommend Tinder or Match or is it Bumble? Bumble, I don't know. One of those things. all right? Because people are on there for very different reasons. Maybe it's a hookup, maybe, you know, and through that you have to really filter through people. Like, how many good Christian, Coptic or Orthodox people are you going to find out there? Probably not much. There are Coptic ones. I think there's Coptic Match and there's Me and Right. Those are the two that I know about. And it's nice to use it when you're in an area that are not, there's not a lot of Coptic people around, there's not a lot of Orthodox Christians, and you want to meet others. But I have like mixed feelings about the dating apps. It's very hard to tell what a person is like just through a picture and some like very basic questions about them, because I've looked through these apps with my friends who are single. And it's always better to like meet someone in person, or it's even better, ask your close friends or your, you know, trusted servant or your priest or whatever, hey, if you know somebody who's single, I'm interested in looking, you know, people have been matched up and that has worked out really nicely for them. And it's easier than just kind of going out there and trying to figure it out yourself. All right, last one. Is it okay to date outside of my race? Again, we talked about this. It's not about the race, it's about the religion and the faith, right? Somebody can be in the Coptic church but not Egyptian. I will say this though, it will add, sorry guys, last thing. It will add a level of complexity that might not be there if you have somebody of the same culture. I don't have to fill them in on what my culture is like, even language, just like different etiquette. You know, I wouldn't do things in an Egyptian household that I would do in like an American household. So it just adds another like level of maybe difficulty, and it can be worth it for some people to get through that and learn through that. Some people are like, you know what, I'd rather just find somebody that already knows all these things. So that's the race part, but the religion part is the more important part of, are they going to bring me closer to Christ? Do they have that God's love? Are they going to be able to build that rock foundation with me? And if the answer is no, then it's not the right person for you, or maybe you should be looking for somebody who's already close to Christ. I'll tell you the most attractive thing about, you know, my husband when I first met him was his spirituality. I think, you know, he's very good looking too, but attraction was also there. But that spiritual attraction was like the #1 thing for me. Like I knew I wanted to serve God. Like I was doing all these services and mission trips, and that kind of lifestyle was very attractive to me. It was like, I want a partner that's going to be in it with me, that I'm not going to have to drag through these things. And you know, thank God he provided that, but there's a lot of other wonderful guys out there, Egyptian or non-Egyptian, who could have been, you know, wonderful people, but I wanted somebody to bring me to salvation, right? To help me on that journey, to help my kids, to, you know, lead the family in that way. And it would have been much harder to do that with someone who's not in the faith and not as strong in the faith as where I thought myself are. Ooh, I got one more question. Okay. It says, are the boundaries the same in case of homosexuality? First of all, homosexuality is not, you know, biblically correct. And I've given talks about this before, and it can take a whole other hour, but there are so many different places in the Bible that warns against homosexuality, calls it an abomination in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, you know, St. Paul says, you will not enter the kingdom if this is like a sin that, or a lifestyle that you're living in. He lists a whole bunch of other sins too, but homosexuality is one of them. So if you're struggling with same-sex attraction, please talk to your brother of confession. Fight it like you would fight any other sin. Don't be brainwashed by the messages of today's society and today's world, where love is love, and you know, who cares who you're attracted to or what you think you are, and gender fluid, and so many other things that we can talk about for another day. Okay? Any other questions? Raise your hands. Last call. I think I spent just as much time on the questions as on the talk. Okay, there's a question back there.
You can hear me. I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, what if the girl is like 5 years, 7 years older than the boy? Is this okay with you?
So, you know, psychologists will even tell you this. Forget the church for a second. Girls and guys mature differently. And I've heard numbers thrown out, like if she's like maybe a year or 2 years older than you, okay, you might intellectually be on the same level. And if somebody has other research or other studies on this, you could answer as well. And then to the guy as well, if he's, I think like more than 8 or 10 years older, then it might not be compatible, or it's way more difficult that way, maybe not recommended, such a big age gap. Again, every person, even if you guys have grown up in the same culture, the same kind of household, similar, the same church, the same ethnicity, you're still going to be different. There's still going to be compatibility things you need to work out. So adding an age to it, adding a different race, adding a different religion, you're just adding to the complexity of the compatibility that you're going to need to work through more problems, more issues. Not that they're impossible, but like pick your battles. Know what you're willing to fight for, what you're willing to put up with, and what you're willing to work through. All right, one piece of advice that I'm going to leave you with. And someone told me this when I was younger. They said, you want to pick somebody that is going to require you to put the least amount of work to be happy. Okay, do you want me to repeat that again? You want to pick someone where you're going to put in the least amount of work, because marriage is work, right? Relationships are work no matter what. There will be work. But there's a difference between like I am constantly, like 90% of the time working, and I'm like enjoying 10% of it, versus I'm maybe working, a little bit at a time, and the rest of it is smooth sailing because we're on the same page, we're compatible. Age will add to that, complexity of that work, so many other things. So, like, why create more work for yourself? I want to do the least amount of work in anything in life, right? Not just relationships. So you want to be smart about that. All right, 2 more questions came in. Should we stop or should we continue? Okay, sorry. What if you're not interested in sex? Wouldn't that make it harder to find someone? I'm guessing if you are asking this question, maybe you're a little bit younger. If you're not interested in it, that's fine. At your age, that's a good thing. That's one less temptation. Sexual desires are maybe not so tough for you to control. That's wonderful. In the right time, listen, I remember when I was younger, my friend in like the cafeteria in school, in like middle school told me about sex. I was like, ew, I'm never doing that, right? It's something that comes with maturity and with understanding what God's design is for procreation and for, husband and wife. So don't worry about it if that's something that's not on your forefront now. With maturity, with the right age, with all these things coming together, you're not going to see it as a bad thing. It's going to be a beautiful thing in the marriage. Okay? And then the last one, what is a suitable age for marriage? Again, letting your number. Everybody's different. They reach that stage in life differently. I have friends who've gotten married in their 20s, friends who've gotten married in their 30s. People are just, maybe God doesn't put that person in your life when you're younger for your own good, so your age is going to be a little bit older. That's okay too. So it really depends on you. That's a good question to ask your parents, to ask your father profession, to ask your close friends, like, hey, do you think I'm mature enough for a marriage, for a serious relationship? If they tell you no, then you're not ready. If they say, yeah, I think you've got your life together, and you have a good head on your shoulders, you know the mentality, you know what you're looking for in marriage, you understand what it's about, then that's a good age, whatever that age is at. Okay? That was it. Any other question? Okay, one more question. Sorry, Dr. Samuel has one more question.
We meet a situation like a boy and a girl, complete harmony, and they love each other, but the parents reject this boy for whatever reason. How they went to the church, I want to try, but the parents still stubborn, no for this boy. What this couple should do?
Okay, so there's 2 situations here, right? The parents are right to say no if they have good reasons, okay? And your father of confession can help you decipher that, and they can tell you, listen, I think you need to listen to your parents. They have your best interest at heart. They have good vision for this, and this is, listen to them in their wisdom. And then the opposite one, if your parents are just stubborn, if like the person is not a doctor and they're wonderful, but they're like, no, you need to marry a doctor, right? And they have like unreasonable expectations and requirements, then as tough as this sounds, right? The Bible tells us to honor our father and mother. Be patient and pray. Pray that God changes their heart. Abuna can help you talk to them, someone else that they trust. Find who your parents listen to. So I actually met someone who was trying to get into a relationship with someone, and her parents were like, absolutely not, this is not the right person, and they had like a different kind of mentality that maybe was not 100% correct. And she realized that the dad's parents, her grandparents, are ones that will like give the dad wisdom, and he will listen to them. He will listen to Abuna, but he's going to listen to his parents. So she figured that out, went to talk to Tita too, and they kind of spoke some sense into him. But it took a long time for him to come around. I know lots of other people who saw someone and they're like, no, this is not the right person for no good reason. They broke up. They spent some time like really praying, really seeking God's will, and like miraculously their parents came around and they said, okay, sorry, you were wrong, we're willing to give this another chance. So it could be either case, they're right or maybe they're not right. And either way, if it's God's will, it's going to happen. It might be bumpy, but trusting God and keep praying to Him.
Thank you so much. That was awesome, right?
Break.
Guys, I expected more questions. As we are done with marriage now, Abuna Mercurius will give us a talk on monasticism. Okay? Sorry, I'm joking. هناخد بريك وبعد البريك هيبقى a lot of fun. What is the time now? 2:30. We'll be back 2:30, alright? 2:30. لا ما فيش اسمه